So I just want to first welcome everybody for coming out to this. We're hosted tonight by the Summit Neighborhood Association, so I'll just tell you super quick, just our mission is to improve the quality of life in the Summit neighborhood. Our meetings are the third Monday of every month at 7 p.m. and they're actually in the room right next door, right behind us here. And everybody's welcome, so please feel free to just drop in, join the conversation. We encourage guests, we really enjoy it. Our yard sale, our annual yard sale is this Sunday. That's the only upcoming event I'll announce because it's this Sunday, 9 o'clock. There'll be scattered yard sales all throughout the city. I think we have like 30 or 40 of them happening around the city. There's a map that you can get at the Citizens Lot parking lot at 9 a.m. And also a lot of the merchants on Hope Street will have sidewalk sales going on that morning also. That's this Sunday. So I'm going to just jump right into it and introduce our moderators and other hosts for the evening. Right here next to me is Gail Gifford. Gail and her husband John Howard, who's also a former SNA president from a few years ago. They've lived in this neighborhood for over 40 years, right? And same house for over 3 decades here in Summit. Gail served in the trenches of community organizing in this area. And I won't go into the long list of roles she's played for nonprofit organizations here in Providence or in the whole state. But I'll jump right to her current organization. In 1996, her and her husband John formed Cause and Effect, which is a consultancy for nonprofit organizations, helping them with strategy and board development and fundraising and things like that. And she's just a great person in the community. We're so lucky to have her. She's one of those people that just shows up for things like this or for other things whenever something needs to get done. When the Summit listserv started chattering about the panhandling issue, Gail suggested that we do this forum on the listserv. She suggested that, and folks, I imagine a lot of you guys here tonight, agreed that it would be helpful, as did our representative, Aaron Regunberg. And Aaron offered his assistance as well, so they both agreed to co-moderate. Aaron should need no introduction to you. He's standing right over here. He needs no introduction because I'd be surprised if there's someone here who hasn't had a conversation with him one-on-one. He's our rep here in District 4, is it? Or District 4. All of us here, and that's his district, and he's just on the scene. He's very good at just showing up and being there. And again, like Gail, I think we're just so lucky to have this guy representing him, representing us, me personally. He just brings real integrity, responsibility to our General Assembly, standing up for environmental issues and humanitarian issues, educational issues, economic issues. I'm proud to have him as my representative and as your representative. And more so, I'm proud to have both of these people as personal friends. So I'm going to hand it over to them right now. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and let's get started.
Dean is the president of the Neighborhood Association here. Aaron, do you want to say anything first? Or?
I'm going to let you.
All right, you're going to let me go here. So I want to do an overview of what tonight will be for the next hour and a half through 8 o'clock. So you have a sense of what that is. And then I'll introduce our panel and then we'll move forward. So the idea of this, as Dean said, came from the listserv where folks were really wondering and having lots of questions. And because I work a lot with the homeless service providers and housing advocates and others, I said, well, I happen to know some folks who maybe could shed some light on what's going on here. And then we added a few other people into that. So each panelist will have 10 minutes to talk to the issues from their perspective, and I'll tell you who they are in a minute so you'll know what their perspective is. And then they get to talk among themselves and we sort of respond to each other and further the conversation. And then for the last 25 minutes or so, we'll take your questions. And the way we're going to do that is you've got little index cards on your seats. If you need a pen, there's some over at that table near where Dean just went and sat. And if you would write your questions down as we move through, and then Carrie, do you want to raise your hand? And Dean, you just met. So if you want to send your cards, once you've got your questions set down to them, then we'll have them sort through. And that'll give us an opportunity to have everybody, as many voices as we can, represented in the questions at the end. And we do that for candidate nights and other things. It works pretty well here. As I said, our focus is kind of a teach-in for those of you who are old enough like me to have lived through the 60s and 70s. Before we jumped into activism in any way, shape, or form, one of the things we wanted to do was learn about the issues as much as we possibly could. So I'm asking if there's a group agreement for tonight that it's about active listening, right? So really that we're here to learn and hear. And I always like to share with the groups that I work with a Quaker expression, which is we all own a piece of the truth, right? So that everybody has their perspective on something and there's something we can learn from each other. So hopefully that's the intent. We're not here to debate or anything like that. It's really to learn, right? What else? I guess that takes me, you know what, the one thing, Dean, bathrooms?
Right out here.
Okay, so if you need to do that, I also say to groups, if you've got a bad back or whatever, or I see little kids here, if you need to get up and move around, that's okay too. Do that, please, so that the environment suits you. So let me tell you who's on the panel here. From the left is Jeff Dana, who's the city solicitor for the city of Providence. And Jeff will give us a perspective, and it's not in this order, but Jeff's perspective will be, what are the legal issues around panhandlers and some of the stuff that's been going on downtown. So he'll present it from that perspective, kind of how did we get here, and also share, as you probably been paying attention to the news, the city's plan and what the city is thinking about for grappling with some of the issues that relate to panhandlers and the homeless and the poor in our communities. Next to Jeff is Linda Katz. Linda Katz is co-founder and policy director of the Economic Progress Institute. And the Economic Progress Institute is a fabulous resource for our state. They're the kind of go-to place, go-to experts for information and data and policy analysis around issues of budget and economic well-being of Rhode Islanders. Did I do that okay?
That's great.
All right. Next to Linda is Rabbi Adam Lemberger, who is now the executive director of the Helen Hudson Foundation for Homeless America. He's also a board member and former board chair of the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless, and just an all-around wonderful man. And then next to Alan, as is Linda and Jeff too. Next to Alan is Diana Burdette. Diana is executive director of an organization you probably have never heard of that does some of the most amazing work in the city and the state. The organization is called PICA. It was founded as the Providence In-Town Churches Association. And PICA does many things, but among the things they do are intensive case management with the homeless. So really intense one-on-one work with folks who need their assistance. They also run the Friday meal site at Mathewson Street Methodist Church. It's located at the church, but PICA actually runs it, which feeds 200 folks every Friday night. They run the largest food pantries in the state of Rhode Island. So both at Gloria Day and also in Oldeyville, and are serving over 12,000 more now. 18,000, and that's undifferentiated folks per month, all right? And those are people who are housed, so it's working families, the elderly, disabled, and individuals. They also help people prepare for benefits, for getting Social Security or SSI benefits by helping them do things like find their birth certificates and get ready for doctor's appointments and all of those kinds of things. So that's the work that they do. So I want us to start, though, with Cliff Wood, who's to the right of me here. And Cliff's, very briefly, Cliff is the executive director of the Downtown Parks Conservancy. So the Downtown Parks Conservancy works to engage our public spaces in downtown and put programming on and make sure that they're great places for people to be. Is that good enough? It's a public-private partnership. And so I wanted to ask Cliff to just sort of do a 5-minute overview of, like, why are we all in this room together? What are the issues? What are people concerned about? What are you experiencing, both downtown and as we see things out in the neighborhoods? So Cliff?
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, I'm Cliff Wood. I run the Downtown Providence Parks Conservancy. We are a public-private partnership to repair and program and engage the community in their public parks, public spaces downtown. So that includes Kennedy Plaza, Burnside Park, Biltmore Park. We have a relationship with the skating rink, and we're working toward a system where we will help manage and maintain and steward all the downtown parks between Kennedy Plaza to Water Place, the Riverwalk, the new bridge, and the new park across where the stadium's not going to be. So, future of past Rhode Island. So, I just spoke with Gail yesterday about this, but I wanted to take the opportunity because from our point of view, and I live in this neighborhood, but I spend every day downtown as well. And the point that I would like to make fundamentally, and I don't know where people stand in the room, are they upset about panhandling, or are they upset about the perception of the way people are being treated who are homeless? And from my point of view, this is quite easy, even though it's very complicated. We have to just break apart some of these issues, because when I read in the newspaper or I listen to sort of intelligent people discuss this, I find that the issues are being conflated in a way that doesn't help communication and doesn't actually help solve the myriad concerns that people bring with them. What happened downtown, from our perspective, is that the notion about not enforcing rules around panhandling, which that's an issue, opened a floodgate for people to have real or perceive the notion that crime, petty crime, those kinds of things, there would be no enforcement around that. It took less than a week for word to get around that that's what happened, and the entire town was then overwhelmed with what is mostly criminal activity. From our point of view, if you ask if homelessness is an issue, as a citizen, that's an issue. These folks are working on that, and they should. We also work on that. We have a relationship with Crossroads. We work with the Providence Center. When we identify people who need help, who need services, we work to connect them to those services. That's valuable, it's critical, and we support that. However, what you're seeing downtown is by and large nothing to do with the homeless population. We have homeless folks downtown. I've been downtown virtually every week for 19 years working on one project or another. If I had to list the obstacles to sort of creating a robust city center for us in Providence and in the state, I wouldn't even rank homelessness as an issue, as an obstacle for that. I would list petty crime, I would list vandalism, I would list drug use, I would list drug sale. And it's not the Medellin cartel downtown. We're talking about people who are buying and selling the monkey weed, black market prescription drugs. Becomes quite open air. So one of the things that we do when we talk about stewarding the space, we feel in this placemaking, which is the discipline that we practice, that good, healthy use of public shared space supplants negative use. So for instance, if we have programming for children and it is well subscribed, the area where we do that is no longer a really good market space for OxyContin or monkey weed. If we have a place that's allowed to function in that good way, people use the space, and the critical point is that we provide these services, we provide beautiful space, we provide programming for everyone and anyone who wants to use the space in that way. Sometimes we provide those services for people who actually don't have any other access to them. Very high quality. Authors, illustrators, reading books. For adults too, we do programming. So the idea is that trying to decouple the notion that efforts to make public space healthy and functional is somehow oppositional to caring for people and their needs. Nothing could be further than that from the truth at all. I don't know, there's nothing, that's the part of it that for me is simple. We address homelessness and those needs. We work to identify funds, we work to identify all that stuff as a community, and some people lead that effort. But we also don't tolerate the kind of crime that makes public space unsafe, dangerous, where people who are earning a living, whether it's working, owning a shop or running a food truck, are no longer able to do business in the center of our city. That's not healthy, that's not helpful for anyone. So I want to make sure that we understand that, and that when we talk about quality of life crimes, we are absolutely not talking about persecuting. I've read things in the paper about criminalizing homelessness. Absolutely not. What we're doing is providing healthy and safe space for a healthy and safe community. And we are committed to doing both those things because they actually are the same thing. So I wanted to be clear about that for us. There's another issue, and this is the panhandling out in the medians. I don't have that much. I experience that the way you do. I live nearby, and I drive on North Main Street, and that's another issue entirely. For us, the mayor, within the last few weeks or so, has made an effort to make sure that he was more clear on the need for public safety, and that it's not oppositional to the needs of people. So things have changed downtown pretty dramatically with the simple application of public safety efforts. And so that's easier because it's contained. We still have, we still live in a city. There are still issues. There always will be. But the intensity where the town became non-functional, that's shifted. So that's the hook's coming. I may not make it for the duration of the meeting, but I'm going to leave a few cards in the back if anyone wants to talk or wants a tour or wants to know any of that stuff. You call me and I'll show you. So thanks for having me, and I'll see you around the neighborhood.
Okay, so we're going to take like a big detour here, and we'll come back to that. But I asked Linda Katz here to talk to you about sort of that big macro look at economic well-being, if you will, and issues of poverty in the state and the city, but mainly the state. Linda?
Hi, everybody. Usually between 7 and 8, I'm eating dinner and watching Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. So I thought it only appropriate, also because these numbers can get really dry. And I just, well, you'll hear a lot of statistics. I'm hoping that this will be in a way that's a little bit more engaging. So you have on your seat, or there's a couple in the front if people in the back don't have it, what's called 20 questions to start the discussion. So this is like a self-test. You won't be graded, and you don't have to pass it to get your high school diploma. But I'm hoping that people will just sort of call out answers as we go through the questions together. So the first, in terms of the big picture in Rhode Island, is how many people in Rhode Island have income below the federal poverty level? So just, what do you think it is in your own mind? And then if somebody wants to just throw out which answer they think it is, not you want.
Okay.
1 in 7.
1 in 7, very good, that's right. Recently the census report came out, and there's 1 in 7 Rhode Islanders, or about 13.9%, are living in poverty in our state, and unfortunately that's a number that really hasn't moved over the last 3 years. So it's an issue we really need to look at. And then if we drill down into Providence, what's the percentage of people living in poverty in our capital city? Anybody want to throw out a number? Okay, I'll throw out a number. How about 27.9%? So double the poverty rate in Providence is double that statewide. The poverty level is for a single adult and for a family of 3. Anybody want to take a stab at when we hear people living in poverty, what do we mean if it's a single adult?
11,000.
That's right. So 11,880, and for a family of 3, should have brought candy and like thrown it out as a reward.
29,000?
20,000. Okay. And I'll just mention that when we hear people living below the poverty level, that really doesn't tell us how many people are economically secure. We do a study at the Economic Progress Institute, I almost said Poverty Institute, which was our first name, that looks at what does it really cost to live in Rhode Island? What does it cost a single adult, two parents with two kids, and a single parent with two kids? So we're looking at actual data in terms of housing costs and food costs and transportation costs. We'll be coming out with our next Risen Standard of Need this December. We do it every 2 years. And I'll just put a plug in at that point that if you're interested in getting information from the Economic Progress Institute, there's a sign-up sheet. We do economic progress notes once a month or so, where you can you could be on our e-news list to get updated information. Okay, let's look at the minimum wage, and that's Rhode Island has raised the minimum wage over the last 5 years, thanks to our representative over there to help move that along. Anybody want to take a stab at what a minimum wage worker earns annually?
19,000.
Correct. I tried not to do all A's as the answer for that. I made it wrong. So, just to note there that that's about twice the poverty level for a single adult, and if that parent, if it was a parent with 2 kids and that family of 3, their minimum wage earnings would be just about at the poverty level. Some of the people I've heard in some of the news reports, people who are panhandling are people who have income. So, people should not be giving them additional money. And a number of those people, and I'm sure Diane can speak to this as well, receive SSI benefits, which is basically the federal welfare program for people who either have not worked a lot and paid into Social Security, or perhaps they've never worked. And so it's for people who are disabled, totally unable to work, or people over the age of 65. So the SSI payment monthly? $760, right? $760.92, which is, as you can see, is the $9,000 is way below the poverty level for a single adult. And I just want to mention there, because I think part of what we'll probably talk about is state policies that can help address poverty in our state, or the conditions around poverty. That federal benefit is in part a federal standard that everybody in every state receives, and then states have the option of supplementing that with a little bit more money. So the federal part of that is actually $721, and the state kicks in another $40. That state amount used to be adjusted every year with inflation, as the federal amount is, so that at least people were sort of keeping pace with growing costs. But as a budgetary move, probably 10 or 15 years ago, the state froze the state supplement. So what happens every year now is the federal benefit goes up, but the state benefit stays the same, so people start to fall behind. Their income is not really keeping up with inflation. Okay, number 7. For people who don't get SSI benefits, there are people who are waiting to get SSI benefits. They may have been injured, they may have an addiction that has sort of flared up and they're not able to function. So they can apply for SSI benefits from the Federal Social Security Administration, and as they're waiting for those benefits to kick in, bless you, they can apply for benefits from the state, which is called the Bridge Program. And that Bridge Program pays, what do you think? $350. $350. That would be good, except it's only $200. So $200 a month under the Bridge Program. So let's look a little bit, so that's sort of the income side of things. Let's look a little bit at food. How many people in Providence do you think receive SNAP benefits, which used to be called food stamps? The program formerly known as food stamps.
40,000?
It's actually the 55.5. That's about 1 in 3 Rhode Island Providence residents are receiving food stamps. And the average benefit per person per meal, what do you think? $1.50, exactly right. So I'm sure Diana will talk about this. SNAP benefits are not there to provide full access to food purchasing for families. It actually is, that's why we see even working families who might be if you add up somebody who's working at minimum wage and also gets SNAP benefits, they still don't have enough to make ends meet. So we see working families coming to food pantries as well, because they have to supplement their income and their SNAP benefits. Okay, the last 10, am I okay in time? Okay, ooh, I'll talk fast. So housing, a huge issue. And recently Housing Works Rhode Island just put out their latest housing data book. So this is a couple of questions from that. First, so background, a household is considered cost burdened if it spends more than 30% of its annual income on housing costs. What do you think the percentage of Providence renters are who are considered to be cost burdened? And this doesn't include us folks who live on the east side. Oh, come on, take another guess. What, 57, right, 57%. So over half of renters in Providence are paying more than 30% of their income in rent, and it's a little higher, the statewide number is 52%. Has that statewide number gone up or down since 2000?
Gone up.
Gone up, that's right. It's gone up from 37% in 2000 to the 52% in 2016. So that's a 41% increase. And lastly, on housing, what percent of housing stock in Providence is considered to be affordable?
10.2.
10.2, that's a good guess, but it's 14.8. And it's 8.3% statewide. So we've covered housing, food, income. Let's look a little bit about educational attainment, because we know that the more you learn, the more you earn. What percent of Providence residents do not have a high school diploma? 27%, right? And the percent of residents who have only a high school diploma, so they graduated high school, which also really doesn't tell us about their literacy or math skills, but they at least have a high school diploma? 23. So if you add those up, it's 50% of Providence residents have a high school diploma or less. And the average earnings for a Rhode Island adult who does not have a high school diploma?
13,000.
Very good, 13,683, that's exactly right. So again, for a single adult, that's a little bit above the poverty level. And the average earnings for an adult who has only a high school diploma? Oh, we only have 4 more left. It's 20,890.
That's not 8.
You're good. So the last 3 things just really look at sort of what are some of the macro issues that are going on that have caused our state and our residents to sort of not be able to make ends meet even when they're working. And the first thing is, and this will be an easy answer, right? Which state lost the largest share of manufacturing jobs between 1990 and 2013? Rhode Island.
Let's go.
And really what's happened in our state is that we've, and this is true across the country, there's been a shift in jobs from the manufacturing sector where somebody with a high school diploma or less could earn a fairly good wage in manufacturing, not advanced manufacturing, but the old-fashioned manufacturing. And now that's been replaced with service sector jobs, which just do not pay as well. And the largest number of jobs in Providence, which sector do you think has the largest number of jobs? Right, education and health, right? So you have the hospitals, you have the universities. But within those sectors, there are certainly high-paying jobs, but there are a lot of fairly low-paying jobs. And so the last question here is, what's the average hourly wage for a home health aide who's working in that health sector? $12.80, okay? Which is $26,000 a year. And, you know, not enough to support a family. So,
Thank you, Liz.
you're welcome.
What was the answer?
Pardon?
Did I miss it?
Oh, 8, number 8?
Number 8. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Right. So the other income support program, so there's SSI for people with disabilities, the Bridge program for a disabled adult who's waiting for an SSI decision, the cash assistance program for parents and kids is called the Rhode Island Works program. It's sometimes called the TANF program. And so the question is, what's the monthly benefit for a family of 3?
750?
That would be nice, but it's $554 a month. And that is a benefit amount. The state controls how much it pays families on cash assistance. I moved to Rhode Island in 1978. The benefit for Rhode Island Works was $554, and it's still $554. So remember, the SSI benefit federally goes up every year, indexed to inflation. Social Security benefits are indexed to inflation, not so for the benefits that we give. I don't like to use the word most vulnerable, but in this case, it's our kids who are the most vulnerable.
I just want to give a huge shout out to Linda Katz and the Economic Progress Institute. You know, at the General Assembly, when session starts, there's a certain number of sort of the denizens of the State House who are always there. And by and large, those are lobbyists for particular special interests, whether they're big corporations like CBS or the NRA or what have you. And there's not that many people who are there who are always up there, like ready with information to advocate, who are representing everyone else in the state. And the Economic Progress Institute fills that role. They are always ready whenever someone, you know, suggests some really bad policy, like let's cut income taxes for the wealthy again, or state tax or whatever. You know, I can run to the EPI and say, I need you to get some data quickly about why this is a really bad idea so I can distribute it, and they're always there. So really, they deserve some major kudos for all of us who care about this issue.
We are a public charity, so they're depend on funds from you and I. Diana?
I have a confession to make, first of all. I am a resident of the Summit neighborhood. This is my first meeting of the Summit Neighborhood Association. So thank you for having me here tonight. As Gail had mentioned, we serve 2 populations, one of low-income people who are housed through our food pantries, and then the other 3 programs address people who are homeless. And what Linda has presented are probably eye-opening figures for most of you, and I'm going to do a little bit of myth-busting before I go into my portion. SSI benefit, many people will think that welfare is alive and well in Rhode Island. What she was talking about with Rhode Island Works is the Rhode Island equivalent of welfare, and the women who receive this very small benefit also have to be in school or working, am I correct? So they don't have much money to live on, and they have to be following certain requirements, and I believe the maximum is 2 years in a lifetime. So if you are on the program for 2 years, something happens, you can't go back on it again once you've used up all your benefits. Also for SSI, it's not just a matter of saying, oh, I'm disabled. It's a very intricate process to determine whether someone is disabled, and they are much more stringent now than they used to be. If someone has a co-occurring disorder, which is a mental health issue and substance abuse, they have to be able to prove that they're no longer using substances in most cases in order to get their benefits. Also, many people, especially in the homeless population, haven't had access to health care. Affordable Care Act has helped a lot, but they can't prove that they have a disability, so they're not able to access the benefit. And also, with the $200 bridge program through the state, you also have to prove that you have to be pending SSI, like Linda said, but you also have to be able to prove that you are disabled. You have to have doctors document it. So it's not like you can just go to the SSI office and say, I'm disabled, and apply for the benefits. In most cases, it takes people approximately 2 years to get the benefits. And one of the programs that we have with our homeless population is the SOAR program, which Gail alluded to, which is a very intensive program where people are able to access benefits in 4 to 6 months, which enables them to get a monthly payment. They may be eligible for housing, and it is life-altering, really. And then our food pantries, the proportion of people in Providence, I'm not holding this in the right place, who have to access food pantries just to make ends meet is huge. Our pantries feed 50% of the people in Providence who access food pantries. They're all working poor, as was alluded to. 40% of households cannot have to choose between paying rent and buying food, or paying for utilities and buying food. They are elderly people who live in subsidized housing, and many of whom, once they are in housing, only receive $15 a month in food stamp benefits. And food stamps don't cover things like paper goods, toilet paper, other necessities, so they have to pay for those out of the rest of their Social Security benefit, as well as prescription drugs. So children and the elderly are the two most vulnerable populations, as determined by the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. Our pantries also distribute senior boxes, which is a box of food specifically determined to be good for the nutritional needs of seniors, and each of the pantries distributes over 100 of those each month. And at the downtown pantry, we have home delivery, we call it PICA pod, to 300 people who are elderly or shut-ins and can't get out to access food, so their neighbors bring their food to them. Also, people who are on green cards are not eligible for food stamps for 5 years, and people who are undocumented aren't eligible for any benefits. So we have many people who would not be able to eat if they weren't able to access the pantries. Onto our homeless population programs. As we said, we have the SOAR program for Social Security. We do the main meal every Friday night for the homeless, and try to provide programming while we have a captive audience. So we have a free legal clinic once a month. We've had health screenings by Brown University medical students, flu clinics, HIV testing, so that there's always something going on in addition to the meal. And it's been run by the same volunteers for over 40 years, none of them receiving a paycheck, and all of them just treating everyone with dignity and respect, serving a sit-down dinner in place to people. And lastly is our homeless outreach program, where last year we saw over 1,000 unduplicated homeless people. Most people think of homelessness and they think of the people that are hanging around downtown. The majority of homeless people, over 15%, 85% of people who are homeless temporarily. They have a crisis in their life, they can't pay the rent, they're homeless, they move in with relatives or friends, and then they get back on their feet and they're able to become housed once again. The people that we deal with are that other 10 to 15% who are the chronically homeless people, for many reasons have not been able to access any assistance. I always say, when you want to see the face of the homeless, just look in the mirror, because that's there but for the grace of God go I. That most of us know people who have an alcohol problem, or maybe use pot or prescription pills to excess, or have had children who've had to come back home because they couldn't afford housing once they graduated from college, or someone who's gone through a divorce and had to move back with family. And most of us are in that category because we have a support system. The people that we serve daily have no support system. In many cases, their families are the ones that caused the problems. And they've suffered all their lives with mental health, with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and because of not being able to access health care, they've self-medicated. So they've used drugs or they've used alcohol to ease their pain. Like I said before, the Affordable Care Act has helped a lot, so when people come in and they're not covered by health insurance, we make referrals so that they can get on the Affordable Care Act. The easy answer for ending homelessness is housing, but unfortunately that's not a big priority. We are fortunate in this state because the legislature voted to have a steady stream of money that can be used in various ways to provide housing, and it's paid for by the real estate transfer tax. So that's one funding source, and HUD is the main source for other funding. The group of people we work with are chronically homeless people, and it's been proven that if you put people into housing, it's a lot less expensive to treat them than it is if you try to find them on the streets. Most people who are homeless don't have phones, they don't have an address, you can't find them, they give up sometimes and just disappear. But with the Housing First program, you find the people, you get their documentation together and put them into housing no matter what their issues are, and then provide the supportive services that they need to stay in housing. Linda had talked about, I think it was 14% of affordable housing in Providence. Oh, okay. Affordable housing in Providence, and really there's only 4% at any one time that's available. So I wanted to put a little face on homelessness. One of the biggest issues that there is not that much shelter space, and particularly for women. So they live outside, they sell themselves to men to stay with them to keep them safe so that they don't get beaten up, which we see almost every day, people coming in that have been abused. And it's a full-time job being homeless. Brenda was one of our clients who came in. She was homeless for well over a year, sleeping on a lawn chair outside and in the bushes down by Kennedy Plaza, down by the river. She had lived with her mother and her brother, and they both passed away. She was on SSI and couldn't afford an apartment, so she became homeless. She would come in and see us, and several times she came in with black eyes because people had robbed her. That's one of the statistics that's underreported, is that many of the victims of crime downtown are homeless people, but they don't report it because they may have warrants and they're afraid they're going to be arrested or afraid that no one's going to pay any attention. But she's a success story because with the permanent supportive housing, we were able to find her housing with Riverwood, get all her documents together, and she now has her own apartment. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer questions after.
I'm going to turn to Jeff, and sort of to start us off with, like, what provoked suddenly panhandlers appearing everywhere? It feels like that. And then what are the legal issues that the city faces? And if you could give us a little bit on the mayor's plan.
Okay. Well, I guess I assume you want me to talk more about the panhandling and legal issues, so I'll just quickly talk about some of the mayor's plan, because I think it follows along neatly with the sobering statistics and conversation we've just had. Obviously, there are too many homeless residents, and way more than that, we have far too many fellow residents of the city who are consistently at risk of homelessness because of poverty and not enough affordable housing. So the mayor, the city, within the limited resources that the city has, are constantly focused on the long-term strategy of assisting groups that are working to provide more affordable housing. So that's something that the city always has in mind with anything it does, whether it be legislative advocacy or partnering with the state or nonprofits, because really that's what's needed, is more affordable housing. In addition to that, the city is working in partnership with service providers to create a day center for both homeless and folks who are in shelters to have a place to go during the day and access services that they may need. Also working with Amos House to create a Hand Up program, which is modeled after something that is being done in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to provide work opportunities for folks that are panhandling, whether they're homeless or not. Also, we will be putting together something called PVD Gives. That will also be a website where folks can make contributions, in addition to meters, sort of like parking meters in places downtown, so that folks who would otherwise give to a panhandler, they may not feel comfortable doing that, or they may not want to do that. But they want to help in some way, and it can be an easy way for them to provide some assistance that could go to help folks in that situation. Finally, one other program is a diversion center that the city is working with the Providence Center to develop a diversion center, and they're preparing for a November launch of that, and that is something they're going to work in close coordination with public safety to assist folks who are dealing with addiction issues, with mental health issues, to get them services they need. As far as panhandling, I know there's been a lot of discussion about panhandling lately, and the city has an anti-panhandling ordinance. It's still on the books. Two things I'll start off by saying about that. First of all, it's not actually an ordinance under which many people have been arrested in the past. Looking at our statistics over the last several years, it was very rare for anyone to actually be arrested, even rarer for them to be prosecuted under that ordinance. But it did exist. It was certainly there. It's something, you could say the fact that there was this law on the books could have been a deterrent that someone would know that panhandling is a crime and they don't want to commit a crime. The city was threatened with a lawsuit several months ago by the ACLU. In the lawsuit wasn't actually filed. We were just threatened with a lawsuit to stop enforcing the panhandling ordinance. And the basis of that lawsuit would have been a Supreme Court case. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case in 2015 that actually wasn't about panhandling. It was about signage. But courts, since that case came out a little over a year ago, there have been lawsuits against several municipalities challenging the enforcement of their panhandling ordinances. And in every single case, the courts have found that panhandling is legal and you cannot enforce a panhandling ordinance. Essentially, panhandling is a First Amendment right. The major cases in the last year were cases against the city of Worcester, Lowell, Massachusetts, Grand Junction, Colorado, and a very recent case from where a pretty limited anti-panhandling ordinance of Tampa, Florida was found to be unconstitutional. So once we received the threat of this lawsuit, the mayor asked me to review the case law and review the ordinance and make a recommendation. And it was actually putting aside policy, because people can have all kinds of different opinions about whether enforcing an anti-panhandling ordinance is good policy or not, but it's clearly not legal. Panhandling is something that is, solicitation is clearly legal. At least we haven't, since the Supreme Court case, we haven't found any judge who has found an anti-panhandling ordinance to be legal, to be enforced. There is a cost associated with trying to enforce an ordinance that would seem very clearly not to be enforceable. We've got the city of Worcester that tried to defend their ordinance, and they're facing over $1 million in legal fees that they're likely to have to pay. The city of Lowell is looking at, I think, $800,000 in legal fees that they may have to pay. So I think that what the mayor and the city determined is that it's just really not practical, putting aside any policy discussion, it's not practical at all to try to enforce that ordinance. What we've tried to do, and to Cliff's point of this idea that folks had, okay, the city's not going to enforce panhandling or the anti-panhandling ordinance, so that means anything goes, is to have a more intensive police presence and to make sure that folks know that just because panhandling's okay, it doesn't mean that crime is okay. So we've tried to have as much of a police presence as we can and enforce laws that are on the books that have nothing to do with panhandling to make the public space a safe space. And we're trying to work with service providers because we're not going to arrest our way to resolution of problems that we have. That's not what the city wants to do for folks that are committing petty crimes that are related to the fact that they're in poverty. So the city is working, and the police department is working really closely with a number of different service organizations to try to get services for folks that need it, and for folks that are just engaged in crime, whether it be violent crime or drug dealing, we're anticipating, and I think we're already seeing the results of, an enhanced police presence in places where that's occurring, to cut that down and make it a safer public space for everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. And don't forget PICA City, because as I said, they're the agency that does like this intensive work that everybody forgets or doesn't know exists. So I'll put in my plug for them. And I'll, full disclosure, they were a client of mine at one point, which is how I got to know about the fabulous work that they do, which is how I get to know about all the fabulous work that happens in the state. All right, so Alan, folks, we're all sitting here as compassionate and empathetic people, and really, like, how do we think about this? What do we do?
Thank you very much. And to the panelists, you give me a lot to think about, always. I wish I could say, first of all, my name's Alan Flam. I work for an organization now called the Helen Hudson Foundation for Homeless America. It's a big name. It's a very small family foundation that was recently organized in Rhode Island. It actually came about. It's a woman by the name of Helen Hudson, who was a really wonderful writer, novelist. Wrote a manuscript called Dinner at 6, Voices from the Soup Kitchen. They grew out of her work in New Haven, Connecticut, working with the homeless community there. People like the ones Diana and her colleagues at PICA work with every day. And at some point she asked, would they tell her their story? Would they be comfortable telling their story? And so this is a collection of 17 stories. So in fact, if you're interested, we sell, I put that in quotation marks, these books. There's no price. You can give $1, you can give $100, and all the money that we collect, actually tonight, will go to PICA. I'm happy to do that. And we make these books available to organizations to help them get the resources or some resources they need to continue their good work. And the books are over there. I think I brought about 10. That's my plug. So I wish I could stand or sit and talk confidently to say, so what do you do? The reality is that I don't know. Like you, I suspect, many of you, this is an issue which is really quite confusing and really difficult. So on my drive here, or drive down North Main Street late in the afternoon, I counted 8 people standing on street corners, holding signs, mostly holding signs. When I exited the highway, there was a person sitting down, saying that he was a veteran, and asking for contribution on the highway. On my drive, I live in Barrington, I drive on the Wampanoag Trail. It's not the city at all, but on the intersection of the Wampanoag Trail and 114A near the mobile station, there are now 3 or 4 people occupying different parts, different locations on that intersection with signs asking to get money, for support. So how do I feel? How do I feel? How do you feel when I see someone on the corner asking for money? So I feel awkward. I feel overly privileged. I feel sympathetic. I feel suspicious and altruistic. Sometimes I feel these things sequentially, and sometimes all at once. Sometimes it could depend on the day. Sometimes it could depend on my mood, what else is happening in my life. I don't have a clear response when I see people standing on street corners. Certainly, if you read Malcolm Gladwell, I'm sure a lot of it is also, who are they? You know, how old are they? How do they present themselves? All those sorts of sorting decisions that we make and judgments that we make unconsciously when we see people certainly are part of what goes through my mind. So like most of you, actually I'll say all of you, I want to help people in distress. I feel that very much. About that question, I have absolutely no conflict. I know that I would love to be able to do something to help these people that I see on the streets. But with panhandlers, I never know whether the person is truly in need, and will my money be used to fuel an addiction? Am I being scammed? Can I really help them at all? These are just all these things that are running through my mind every day. Really, it's every day, just driving down the streets or walking down the streets in Providence and in other places. And that's one thing I actually do want to say. Really, kudos to the mayor and his team of people who are working with service providers and gathering people together to try to respond to this situation. But this is not a problem for Providence alone. This is both a statewide problem and it's also a nationwide problem. Actually, you could say it's a global problem. We live in a time when people are poor. And at a board meeting I was at the coalition, I was talking about this, and people wanted to talk about this issue of panhandling as an issue of homelessness. I'm here to say this is not an issue of homelessness. This is an issue of poverty. This is an issue that people all around us, people perhaps living next to us, do not have enough money to live. And so the new American economy, or at least the new Rhode Island economy that we're looking at, is that people are making a decision that they can stand out on a street corner and make more money and have more human freedom doing that than they can trying to pursue a job or be part of some program that someone has dreamed up for them. That's the reality. Most of the people, many of the people I will assert on the street corners do have a place to sleep at night. They're not homeless. But that doesn't make the issue less important to respond to. And the fact is that even if people do have a place to go, my hunch is that the lives that they're living aren't, we would want to help, we'd feel distressed, they're in distress, we want to try to respond to that. We need to respond to that, both individually, I think, in individual responses, but also communal responses, governmental responses, business responses. It really needs to be bringing everyone together. It's not going to be solved. This isn't an issue that one new program, another innovative service program is going to solve the problem of. It's not going to work that way. And that's what I worry about some of these plans. So when you hear public leaders make claims that, oh, in a few months we can resolve the issues in Kennedy Plaza, I say to myself, what planet is that person living on? If he's going to provide income, better jobs, places to live in, maybe so, but even then, the scale of this problem is enormous. And in Rhode Island, it's getting worse. The statistics that Linda cited, the fact that in her time here, 30, 40 years, we haven't raised the level of cash assistance that people get, that just today in the newspaper, I happened to read these things, so Rhode Island is now 15th in terms of child health care in the country. Not long ago, we were number 1 or number 2, and we could be proud of being a national model in caring for the health of our children, which we know will then allow them to be healthy adults. And today we're 15th, and I would imagine if we keep not investing in these programs the way that we need to, it will continue to go down in those rankings. And that's directly connected, I think, to people who are standing on street corners asking for money. It's an issue of poverty. So, one of the questions people ask me a lot is, how do you know which panhandler is legitimate or not? Should I give money to this person and not to this person? How do I make that decision? So, I think that's a trick question. I think the answer is it doesn't matter. For me, this is where I am in my thinking right now. Tomorrow morning, I may wake up and have a change of heart, or someone here may tell me something that's going to really make me reconsider my my position. Right now, I do not give money to panhandlers. Occasionally, I violate my own principles. I do. I see someone, I talk to panhandlers frequently. I try not just to walk by them, not make eye contact. I'm happy to roll down my window. Like today when I saw the vet, I said, well, tell me, where were you? Aren't you getting care from the VA? Are you connected to Veterans Inc.? There's no reason a veteran should not have a place to live. In fact, we need to know that we've housed the Rhode Island Coalition and many of the organizations that are part of that coalition, the tremendous service providers in the state of Rhode Island, have made housing veterans and people who are chronically homeless a priority in housing. And in this year, over 770 people have in fact been housed. That's a huge, we should be proud of that number and also saying we need to do more and we can do more. And the answer for this one, Diana said, it's simple. The solution for homelessness is housing. We need to get people in housing. It's not just buying houses, it's rental subsidies so that people can afford to get into houses. I know many people who have jobs, they can pay a month's rent, but do they have money for security deposit and a last month's rent as well? Very few people. Low-wage earners who have the ability to sort of get into that market. We need to break through those barriers so that people have housing. So it seems to me if you want to help people who are panhandling, it's not about giving to the individual on the corner. Though you may choose to do that sometimes. You may be moved by their circumstances. They may have a particularly compelling story or sign. I think the response is to give to local organizations who are working on these issues, who are working to house people. Organizations like PICA, organizations who are working on mental health issues, like the Providence Center, organizations like the Coalition for the Homeless, many organizations who are on the front lines on these issues need support every day to hire more case managers, to hire real estate people to help put people into housing. And we also need to invest more and give more to programs that provide people with good job training and the mental health support that they need. Homes is the solutions for homelessness. Jobs are the cure for unemployment, and giving money can satisfy us to a panhandler can satisfy us for the moment, but it doesn't really address the structural causes that are really what put that person on the corner to begin with. And I think that's how I'm thinking about it right now.
Great, thank you.
One more plug, there is a housing opportunity bond that's going to be on the ballot in November. It's question 7. That is easy to do, so you should all vote for that. Tell your friends and family to vote for that, and when they get to the polling place, you actually have to turn the ballot over to mark off number 7, but it's the most important bond issue on the ballot.
So I'm going to skip the conversation with each other, just looking at time, and take your questions. So Carrie and Dean, have folks written questions down that you want to send over? And then Aaron, you want to say something?
I just wanted to add one more thing to Alan's very insightful comments, and it's related. I think it's a big piece of this. One of Linda's 20 questions was around the loss of manufacturing jobs in that context for poverty and economic inequality in our state. And I want to point that out because I think that speaks to a larger issue. There's nothing inherent about a manufacturing job that makes it a good job, right? There was a 538 article a few weeks ago. 538, not an ideological site, right? It's empirical, evidence-based. The headline was, Americans don't miss manufacturing, they miss unions. Manufacturing jobs, we remember back images, those used to be awful jobs. That was child labor, that was people getting their arms cut off, that was like, poverty wages. What changed was that those jobs got unionized. They were able to fight for higher wages. They were able to fight for different laws and regulatory schemes to have safety oversight and transparency and things like that. That's what made those jobs good middle-class jobs. And when we lost those jobs, we were losing unionized jobs, and we were losing jobs that fit under this regulatory scheme that had been created to have safety and oversight. I would argue that this new service sector economy we have, there's nothing stopping those jobs from being those same kind of middle-class jobs. You look at a McDonald's jobs in Denmark, and they are making the same amount that a manufacturing job in America might be making today. Same multinational corporation. What's different is the regulatory scheme, the laws, and the level of unionization. So I think a big part of these larger structural questions is what can we do at the State House to pass a living wage of $15 minimum hour, to pass earned sick leave policies, to pass policies that allow for these service sector jobs to have democratic unionization happening. So I think that's a piece that we don't always connect to these questions, but it's really important.
Sarah. Okay, your questions. I'm not sure who wants to take this one, more than one of you maybe. Instead of money, or in addition to money, is there a card or a flyer or something listing all the services you're entitled to? Like food, clothing, shelter, etc., that could be given to panhandlers. So I think people are thinking like, I'm not going to give you money, but here's where you could go get help. Diana, Alan, you?
So I do know there are a number of different organizations that are doing nighttime outreach to people on the streets, and sometimes they're doing it during the day as well. And there is a very small sheet that gives people access to both meal sites and all the service providers. The Coalition for the Homeless puts it out. It's called Street Sheets. You can find it online if you go to RhodeIslandHomeless.org. You can find the street sheets there, and it's updated since times for meals and big numbers change. And that's handed out regularly by the outreach teams.
Also, in addition to the street sheets, many of the people are in housing since they were homeless and placed in permanent supportive housing. They have no income. While they're working on some form of income, either Social Security or looking for a job if they're able to work, they have no money to buy anything that food stamps don't cover. They don't have any money to buy amenities that we think about. Even in the pantries, most of them don't have meat or eggs or protein sources that most of us have at meals. So they have to use some of the food stamps, or if they have no income, they can't purchase that. So even though they're housed, it doesn't mean that they have money. As we're saying, it's still a poverty issue.
All right, so this is the question I think everybody wants to know, and I don't know whether, but Jeff, maybe you can answer this one. It's a hard one. Who's organizing the panhandlers and shifts and providing the signs? What do we know about that? So there's this sense that there's a syndicate or something out there, right? The paper, Channel 10 did something? Anybody know the answer to that question?
I know several of the people who are outside, and they're not a member of a syndicate. This was not mine. Sorry, maybe you could hear me now. They're not members of syndicates. They're just people who are trying to raise some money, like I said, to purchase food or buy a coffee or whatever. There are some people who run the corners. They use their skills, perhaps not in a way that we would like them to use them, but they do organize people to stand on corners. That's not everyone by any means.
I can gather it's mixed. Some of that, it's some organized people from out of state. It's people who are poor who just see it as an opportunity to get some money. It's not a single thing. The thing about this is it provides an opportunity. Always with poor people, when you have them gathered, it provides an opportunity for people to prey on poor people. I think that's fair to say. So when you have, for instance, panhandlers downtown who are there because they're poor and they need to eat, that creates an environment where if that's seen safe or profitable, to Alan's point, then you get people who are more aggressive. and things become more dangerous. So it's the law of unintended consequences. What would start as you see someone and you feel like they need your help, and you give it, but the repercussions, the reverberations of that create new problems. So this thoughtful answer that everyone is given, but what Alan just said, the complication of that and thinking forward to what are we trying to accomplish, how can we help people in a way that helps is critical, and I applaud everyone here for being willing to think through that.
But this might be for you, or it might be for Jeff, or one of our other panelists. What's the best practice for merchants when panhandlers come in?
It depends. Like I know merchants downtown who have relationships with certain people, and they've gotten to know them, and they come in and they get something to eat or something to drink, and they relax. And there's a relationship between this person and the person that owns the restaurant or whatever. And then there are others who come in who are then very disruptive and perhaps threatening. So again, it's not a thing that's universal amongst everyone. It's acute, and it depends.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what Cliff said, and I also just say that if someone is going into a place of business as being disruptive, then that's something that is unacceptable, and that's separate from panhandling, though.
Yeah.
If they're panhandling, they're allowed to panhandle. They're allowed to ask people for money.
But on the street, right? Not inside the store,
Well,
would they be?
someone can ask them to leave. It's not technically illegal to go in a store and ask someone for money. They can be asked to leave the store, but that's also different from being disruptive and creating a situation where they're engaging in disorderly conduct.
Great. All right, so this is the one that many of us have, and Alan, I think we'll push you a little more on this. If you think it's not a good idea to give money to panhandlers, and you also believe that it's wrong to ignore them, what do you give them or say to them when they approach you?
I think this is just an on switch, there you go. Sometimes people want to be looked into the eye, in the eye. They want you to be able to say hello to them. They're aware, people are very aware when people show this kind of fear and want to get out of the situation. So sometimes it can be a word of hello, like what's going on. I often ask people where they're staying at night, and if they tell me they're out on the streets, I often suggest a place they might want to go to talk to someone. There have been occasions where I've given someone, or do you want a cup of coffee? I think it's try to be a human being and not be afraid. The fact is that it can appear, we can be afraid, we're made to feel uncomfortable, or sometimes we feel tremendously uncomfortable or unsafe in these situations. I think it's important that we have our antenna up. We need to take care about our personal safety, but I also think many of the people that I know who spend a lot of time on the streets, whether they're homeless or formerly homeless, are gentle, wonderful people who've had very hard lives. Often there's a real reluctance to go for services in places because they're not treated very well by and large. Again, you might have read this, but the Department of Human Services in Rhode Island has just recently laid off 70 frontline employees. Many of these people would be the ones who would be dealing as people come into offices for talk about their benefits and being replaced by some computer system that people will be expected to be able mostly to manage by themselves. I don't know about you, but a lot of these issues are really going to be, I think, addressed more effectively when people talk to one another and not just fill out a form on the computer and get some sort of routinized answer when the algorithms turn out to be in a particular way or not. But that's not the way that much of the social service sector seems to be moving, at least in these large systems ways. And I would just say to that, I think we need to turn our gaze two places. I think we can be a little more, bring more sympathy and compassion to the people we see on the streets. And I also think it's important that we bring more of our intention and even sometimes some of our outrage towards the public officials that we need to deal with. We need to be talking to our legislators. We need to make telephone calls. We need to give to organizations. We need to read about these issues because these are systemic, complicated systemic problems. If the solutions were easy, I trust they would have been found already. But a lot of this happens, and a lot of the continued, I would say, neglect for these issues happens because we, people like myself, we who live pretty comfortably, have pretty much absented ourselves from the public square. We're not speaking up. And if we're not going to speak up, things won't get better, I don't believe. We need to really participate more actively in our democracy. And I don't just mean voting every 4 years for a presidential election, because things aren't going to be solved by one person being elected to the White House. Politics happens right in some neighborhood association and your local representative and on school boards and knowing what's happening in politics. And the fact that you're here is really heartening. I'm really preaching to the choir, I think, but you need to talk to friends and family to say we need to re-engage in politics again.
Let me send one to Linda. With an aging population, what's being done in the state to prepare for increasing numbers of elderly?
Well, I think that's a really good question. Again, sort of echoing what Alan said, it's really, we need to be looking at policies at the state level that ensure that there are, it's affordable housing, again, for elders. That's referenced in the book, so that the issues have all been pointed out. There's a work group now through the Office of Health and Human Services looking at long-term care services for seniors. I'll say that the issue of looking at that issue, and some of you may have heard, like, for the last 10 years, we really want to support, we want people to be able to age at home. People need supports to be able to do that. They need income support. They might need home care and other services in the home. The state keeps talking about how it wants to do that, but really has not put resources in both to have affordable housing for seniors and then also to pay for the services that seniors need to be able to age at home. So there is work going on in those areas. I just want to emphasize what Alan said. I mean, the lucky thing in our state is we're really small, and we can get up to the State House and we can influence what people are doing there. And it's all a matter of priorities and where the state wants to put its money. And if we as a community can say to the legislators and the governor, here are our priorities. It's making sure that everybody in our state is housed. It's making sure that, you know, the governor has, we all agree that the best way out of poverty is a job, but it doesn't just happen when you snap your fingers. The governor has her workforce development projects called Real Jobs Rhode Island. It's not clear to us that those services are connecting to the people who need them most, right? That, you know, we don't invest in housing, we don't invest in adult education services and in English language services to give people foundational skills. It's sort of clear what the solutions are. It's really then, I mean, Alan said it's not easy to do, and that's true, but what is easy to do is to sort of raise up voices at the State House to say this is where we want our monies to be going. And we need more people engaging at that level, and learning more, and making their voices heard.
So these last two that I have, I don't know if anyone else has them, but we've got about 5 minutes, I guess, and maybe really 3 minutes, are, if I maybe characterize them as the sense of how do we get the people in need to be contributing to their own solutions, right? So we've got a couple things here like, well, we've got all these foreclosed and boarded up houses. Can Amos House get their carpenters and folks in need in programs that would then rehab those? Another one around the old idea of the workhouse where people grew their own food and sort of took care of themselves. So I think there are a number of those. If anyone wants to talk about that?
I think that's, some of it is a good solution and empowers people to, if they are able to work, but I think many of the people that you see that are homeless, and particularly in the chronically homeless population, have disabilities and are not able to work. So I also think, I agree with what Alan and Linda had said, that when we do supply the basic needs, if you give people clothing, you give them food, this takes care of their basic needs. And for most of us, that makes us feel good because we're helping someone who has a need. It's also coming from a position of power. We have something that someone else doesn't have. And the only way that you can be in solidarity with them is to empower them, whether it's to try to get housing, whether it's to get a job if they're able, and most importantly is to try to change the political will. I think a lot of the issues that are happening is that the homeless weren't so visible before. You didn't see them downtown, you didn't see them on every street corner, so it was like you could ignore the problem, but now they're out there and encroaching on our lifestyle. What are we going to do? And we don't have the political will to give the money to provide some of the benefits that our fellow citizens are in need of. They don't have a support system. So I have heard that every phone call that you make to your legislator is considered to be 10 people. It's very simple to call your legislators and let them know, both state and nationally, let them know how you feel about the issues and where some of this money should go. People shouldn't be living in poverty in the richest country on the planet. And many of the other countries have all these social services because they don't have a military. Over half of our discretionary funding goes to the military. So it's a matter of letting the people that work for us, because we elected them, know how we feel about issues.
So last 1 minute, everybody, is there anything else that you want to convey? Jeff, anything else around the city?
Just to that point of the vacant and abandoned property, the city is very aggressively, actively working on reclaiming vacant and abandoned properties. This can be a painstaking process. We're using a number of different tools to do it. We need to get title to those properties, which often involves some legal processes. We certainly could, once we get title, fix them up more quickly if we had more resources, but it takes money to do that. So we're working hard in a number of different ways to reclaim them, and part of our goal, part of what we're working towards, is to have as many of those properties that we do reclaim affordable for residents. But again, that also takes subsidies, and there's only so much of that to go around. But the city has been working on that very aggressively.
Anyone else? Last thoughts?
Just in the book, Dinner at 6, again a plug, they're just two little quotes to begin. One in Ray in his story says, "Let them know we want to work." And Josie says, "Tell them we're not bad people."
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to Summit Neighborhood Association for hosting this, and Dean for bringing sound and making that all happen. Thank all of you, really, for coming and being so attentive and putting forward your questions, and I hope that you'll continue to think about this, continue to connect up with folks here, and we can get everybody's email to the Facebook account or in the listserv or something, so if you want to connect with organizations, then you can do that, yes. What else? Aaron, do you want to say some last thing? Dina?
Yeah, I always feel blessed to get to represent this community because, our neighborhood people are engaged, they want to be informed when they're thinking about issues, they're compassionate and empathetic. I think this is, just a wonderful example of that, so I love you all. And I just one other just piece of big context that I think, the context for some of these statistics about the number of, insecure people going up and up since 2000, that is happening at the same time as folks at the top are getting more, right? There's the Bernie statistics where the number of the wealth, the percentage of income that's going to the top 1% is growing more and more. So these things are related. It's not just happening in a vacuum. And I think that our public policy, whether we're talking about progressive revenue, I'm going to be introducing a legislation to eliminate the earned income tax loophole where, financial transaction income is taxed differently than normal income that we're working on for every day. They're related, and we need to solve that problem if we're going to have the resources to solve these problems.
So go online, you can find the Economic Progress Institute and all these wonderful fact sheets and data that is there. You can do that. Alan mentioned the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless. Can people come and see the food pantry? So Gloria Day, when is it open? 9 to 1 every day? Monday from 12 to 4 at Gloria Day. That's the church that's right across the street from the Providence Place Mall, at the Francis Street side there. And the church gives you that space for a little bit. Yeah. So, talk to Diana. She has many stories, which we didn't have time for. But really, even just saying, housing, it's not just housing, right? The work that they do and the organizations like them to help people put their lives back together, you should tell more stories about that. And I have a chance. Thank you again to everybody. Take some cupcakes and cookies with you because I don't know what else they're going to go to. So please do that.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Gail.